Check, check, 1, 2. About to start transmission. In 3, 2, 1. We're going to ring the bell.
All right, we're ready when you guys are.
Yeah. Sweet. We'll move these to the back. Do you know Mark Fowler? Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Where are you coming from?
Africa.
I know, whereabouts?
He does a lot of work in Africa.
Yeah, well, nice to meet you. We work in Kenya, in Savo East, in between Savo East and West.
Okay.
And then conservation, but mainly community investment in the communities.
Do you have an
Yeah, do you know Wildlife Works? Yeah, we have an amazing project with 120,000 community members in the corridor between Savo East and West.
Well, she's looking for a job, so if you know her, let her know.
Well, if the carbon markets hadn't collapsed, I would say yes. But right now, no one is. But how long are you here in the States?
Forever.
Are you? Oh, good. So you're okay. So you're here, and what are you working on while you're here? Are you representing Africa? Or what's your interest? What's your interest?
My interest is finance.
Oh, good. Good. Well, good. Finance is important.
Do you want to be out for the bell ringing?
Sure.
Oh, good. I would have helped you carry those out. I didn't know you were doing that. I just put them in the back of the room. Oh, okay.
These I pretty right?
Wow.
It was so old school.
Check one, check two. Yeah, definitely. What's that? I love Al. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the Explorers Club. We're so glad to have you all here. How many people have been to the club before? Nice. All right, good. We got some repeat offenders. It's good to have you all here. We are here for an amazing night. My name is Mark Fowler. I am the chairman of wildlife conservation here at the club, and we have a long history of wildlife conservation at the Explorers Club. Teddy Roosevelt was one of our founding members, and as you know, he saved most of the public lands in the United States. An incredible man, and we are carrying on that legacy tonight. I got to tell you, I'm really honored to be here to introduce our speaker tonight, because Jim Williams is the real deal. Jim is a very accomplished biologist, wildlife biologist. He spent 31 years doing the wildlife biology at the Montana Parks and Wildlife Division, and has done incredible research, incredible work with throughout the West. And so in that alone, he's enough to be a fellow here at the club. But now he's working on some of his most important work, and that's preserving land. Land is the one resource we don't get any more of, and we are quickly running out of lands. And Jim Williams is one of the most unique and accomplished folks out there that actually has the relationships with the people, with the ranchers, with the Native American tribal nations, where he's building coalitions to preserve land on a very large scale throughout the West, bringing back the ancient ungulates. We went from 50 million bison to 300 in the early 1900s. That's when Teddy Roosevelt stepped in and created Yellowstone to save those 300 bison that were left. So, I mean, this is incredibly important work, and Jim is on the front lines of doing this. Luckily, he's very close with Native American tribes and bringing their legacy and their footprint back to the land and welcoming them back as managers of the wildlife and of the lands. So I just am very honored to be here tonight to introduce Jim Williams. He's won a bunch of awards, including the awards here at the club, the Alan Rabinowitz Award here for his book, Path of the Panther, which is definitely worth reading. He's pre-approved by Justin Fernal to speak tonight. So, when you've got pre-approval from Justin, you're doing pretty well at the club. So I just want to say you're all welcome. And Jim Williams, come up, one of my personal heroes.
Well, Justin and I had to coordinate on the coats. I was so excited to finally get to wear my Explorers Club jacket at the Explorers Club. So, Justin, it's nice fashion there. Now, this is an honor and a privilege to be here, especially on a Monday night, on a holiday week. I know all of you have family and travel and a lot going on, and we filled the room, so I'm humbled. But I'm excited, too, to share some actually good news. There's a lot of bad news, you know, in today's world when it comes to ecology, lands, and even people. And there are lots of challenges in the work I'm going to talk about, but it's really a good news story, and it's about moving forward. And I've mixed in some adventures, some footage of some species that you may not get to see here locally in New York or the Northeast. And I'll talk a little bit about my book, but I'll talk about that later. So I'm going to jump right in. So the theme on my presentation is called Exploring Wildlife Connections. So I work for what's called the Heart of the Rockies Initiative. I work for an incredible team. They're small, extremely bright, and very effective. And when I left government, I've been in this wildlife conservation business for over going on 4 decades, if I include all the school. And I took the long route in colleges. You know, it was a lot of fun. I could have been a permanent student. I could have, you know, but you have to make a living at some point and grow up. But nonetheless, I could have worked for any NGO that I wanted to. I was very lucky, and I jumped at the chance to join the Heart of the Rockies because they have one of the coolest programs that the whole world doesn't know about. And in fact, you're one of the first audiences to hear about it because we support 30 land trusts. We have partner with local tribes, and I'll talk about that tonight. And that's kind of sensitive data anytime you talk about property rights and land. And so we haven't really been too public until now. And it's great to be able to show it to you folks, and I think you'll enjoy it. But since it is the Explorers Club, and you are all adventurers, who are the climbers in this room, or hikers? How many people like to hike? Scramble, class 2, 3, 4? Oh, about half of you. See, I knew that. I kind of knew that would happen. So this is where Melora, I want to introduce Melora, raise your hand. I always embarrass Mel. She's right here. This is my wife. And thanks. And Melora's been on all these climbs. In fact, she has no fear, unlike me. I have to manage that. She'll go out on a class 4 ledge and not look back, and my knees are knocking. But we do a lot. This is our backyard. This is Glacier National Park, and this is the eastern side, which is the entire park is Blackfeet country, the Blackfeet tribe. And we'll talk a little bit about some cool projects in a little bit. But this is what it looks like, and I'm going to talk about an area known as the Transboundary Rockies tonight. And that's where the Heart of the Rockies Initiative operates. It's really cool. But that little circle, that red circle, that's called Iceberg Peak. And this is in the Many Glacier. Has anyone been to Many Glacier? In here? Yes, one. I knew someone would have. It's I've seen it referred to as the Switzerland-like place in Glacier Park because it's so rugged, and indeed it is. Well, I had to throw a picture in. This is what it looks like from the top of Iceberg Peak. And I'm kind of a chicken, like I said. Melora would be standing up. I did not want to stand up. That's Chaucy, crumbly rock. And that's a 4,000-foot drop down to Iceberg Lake. But the reason I'm showing that picture, not because I just think it's cool. It's pretty cool. But Iceberg Peak this is what the Transboundary Northern Rockies looks like in the alpine form. And we're going to talk about the prairie form and everything in between. But it's a spectacular landscape that is, after spending the last 4 or 5 days here, there's so much to do. It's just an incredible place, New York City. I'm overwhelmed, a little intimidated. But this is a less peopled landscape. It's still wild. And in fact, almost all of the species that evolved in this landscape are still here, with the exception, prior to 2 years ago, of the bison. The Blackfeet tribe has started reintroducing native bison that evolved there. So it's going to be a complete system again. So what we're going to talk about, so there's 2 things we do. And, I spent a lot of my career, we're going to talk a little bit about research because it's critical. And, just like critical thinking, everything in science in today's world. I almost see people trying to dismantle expertise in science at times for different reasons. But I always go back to the peer-reviewed process, because there is the Western peer review process, there's the tribal peer review process, there's a whole bunch of forms, but that's what's going to lead us. We need to rely on the long-term research projects. And so what we do is protect ungulate migrations, and that could be deer, elk, pronghorn antelope, bighorn sheep, moose. All these ungulates migrate, sometimes great distances, sometimes very short, like a mountain goat to a lick in spring when they're salt deprived. And we also protect carnivore connectivity, grizzly bears, black bears, wolves, wolverine. We'll talk about wolverine tonight, mountain lion, which I worked a lot with. But the underlying theme is we're also keeping working families on the land. This is one of those conservation stories where there's a common thread between hardworking, often rural and conservative ranching families. And folks, they own ranches, many of them the size of a national park, landscape size. They represent what is local and rural in the West and what is the wildlife habitat connectivity between larger blocks of public land like national forest or national parks or refuges or tribal wildlife areas. It's all up to these ranching families, these farming families, these ag operations, of whether that landscape will remain permeable or not in today's world where everyone wants to develop things. We'll talk about that too. So we have 30 land trust members. And so why am I giving the talk? I've been very fortunate, and Mark was very nice. I've worked a lot with large carnivores, got to be involved on the ground floor to develop population monitoring for grizzly bears, wolf conflict programs. That animal's a wolf up there. I'm a lot younger in some of these. That's my disclaimer. But that wolf, that's the reason my hair turned white. People's brain turn off when it comes to wolves. We're just hardwired to get wild about wolves, whether you love them or don't like them. And but we had to develop wolf conflict programs at Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and same thing with bears over the years. And also worked a lot with ungulates, and this is important because these are the long migration species, primarily. I'm holding, that's a bighorn ram up on the right. Those are bighorn sheep being lowered by a helicopter. They're being dipped in the water to cool off, going from Wild Horse Island, where Mark's father and Marlon Perkins did some of the initial transplant filming for Wild Kingdom, Mutual of Omaha, back, I think it was in the 60s. And, but then we're still doing it today. It's a factory for bighorn sheep to restore populations that need it, or introduce new populations where they were exterminated, where they don't exist. And so those are bighorn sheep. And so the lower left and the top left of the screen, those are caribou. Those are mountain caribou. They're not common at all. In fact, they're functionally extinct in the lower 48. And they're in trouble in British Columbia, primarily because of their habitats have been chopped up, and the footprint of humans has just been too great. But that doesn't mean there isn't incredible efforts by the Canadians. A lot of my peers up there are working on ways to restore them to their former range too. So there's some good news here too. So when you work on ungulates and bears, you spend a lot of time in these. And I spent most of my time in a Super Cub doing aerial radio telemetry and also helicopters. But now today, the young researchers have at their disposal GPS satellite tracking technology. You can literally sit at your desk and watch a grizzly bear walk across a boardwalk in Glacier Park live, right? And you couldn't do that 35 years ago. You had to live with the animals. You had to find them in a plane, hike in and see what they were killing, what they were eating. If it was a lion, that's what I did my graduate work on. And you see the back of a pilot's head. And at hour number 2, almost at every flight, I'd throw up. Because you get this diesel avgas kind of blowing back and flying antelope surveys, and I was great. And then once you threw up once, you felt fantastic. Until hour number 3, it comes back, and then you just have to land. And the other thing nice about a Super Cub on the lower right, they have Tundra tires. I drank way too much coffee, and if you had to pee, you can land on a county road. You're not supposed to do that, but we did all the time. My pilot and I get out, but anyway, so I got inspired, and I wrote. This was kind of therapy from wolf complaints about 15 years ago. Wrote a story with our editor, Tom Dixon, at Montana Outdoors called Big Game on the Move. So we did a deep dive into the telemetry. The world was becoming aware of migrations. Joel Berger and Wyoming Game and Fish staff and Grand Teton National Park staff, even the Elk Refuge. I think Steve Callan was there. And they documented the long distance move by the pronghorn antelope that I'll show you in a little bit. But that got everyone's attention, and people love animal movements, kind of like shark movements, whale movements from point A to point B. So I went and did a deep dive, and I thought, who in our country is the long distance migration champion? Anyone want to guess? You think it's a mule deer, an elk, an antelope, a lion, a wolf? Pronghorn. Who said pronghorn? Right there. Of course, you're right. This is a smart group, and I knew that coming in. I can have fun with kids with that, but yeah, there you go, 250 miles. And I'm going to show you some footage in a little bit, and I'm kind of showing some fun stuff to lead up to the land conservation. But these animals are unique because they evolved on this continent. Everything else, the scientists postulate that came over the Siberian land bridge. These evolved here, and those horns are made of hair, like your fingernail or your keratin, your hair, and they actually shed them every year too. And when they run, and you'll see for this footage in the air, when they're alerted and they're disturbed, their rump hairs go up and it's bright white, and they're the fastest land mammal in North America. And I'm going to talk about that too. So I'm going to start. Let's start on the right photo here, the big purple shapes on the right. This is an actual USGS representation of where the glaciers were in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. So you can see the bottom purple one is Yellowstone Park. That's the Yellowstone ice cap. This is an artist's rendition, but it's a USGS map. And you can see the big ice sheets coming out of Canada into Montana and the Idaho wilderness. Well, this is the last ice age, and these pronghorn were here. Well, you can imagine, you can see the arrow, that long migration, which is the telemetry points to the left. But as that ice sheet retreated north, those pronghorn they like to follow the green up, surf the green wave with that nitrogen-rich forage in the spring. They probably likely went further and further north to have their fawns and establish these Pleistocene migrations have been here for millennia, because now on the left, that's Dr. Andrew Jakes, a friend of mine, did his doctorate work on pronghorn, and he actually had an antelope in a bad winter several years ago go all the way down from Saskatchewan through Montana across Fort Peck Reservoir in a real bad winter in 2010, 2011, and it almost went to the Wyoming border. And that's a long ways. But some of these movements, and the reason I'm sharing this, we don't want to lose these. They've been here for millennia. They've been here. The tribal stories talk about them. The tribes know this information, and it's kind of interesting. In today's world with the footprint of humans, we don't want to fragment these movements, okay? Here's what it looks like from the air. Andrew took this picture in that bad winter. This is Montana's path of the pronghorn. Not quite as long as Wyoming, but you can see it's single file in the deep snow coming out of Canada into Montana. So one real quick fact that's pretty neat is they're the fastest land mammal in North America, these pronghorn antelope. Well, so there's an entire book written about this. It's pretty neat. They've evolved behaviors to run from a predator that isn't here anymore. And we had an American cheetah. And this is a fossil in one of the parks, and you can do a deep dive online with this. But so it makes sense. Now they evade coyotes. Every now and again, a mountain. I had a friend, Tony Ruth, was working on them in the northern Yellowstone. A mountain lion took an antelope, but that's a good stalk and ambush. You know, it's not the norm. But this is one of the reasons they run so fast. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, and I want you to pay attention to the land, because we're going to talk about land tonight. So this is an aerial survey. Sonia Anderson in Lewistown is a biologist. Her footage is digital. Mine was all old. She just gave me this from this last year. And this is a disturbance, but it's once a year. And she's picking out calves and adults, looking at the recruitment, because she has to set the hunting seasons where it's legal to hunt it. So you can hear her talk a little bit, but she's going to get down kind of close. The last segment, this is pretty quick. These things are going at least 60 mile an hour, folks. The Super Cup's going about 60 to 70, and the antelope are going as fast. But you're going to notice they run from native prairie here. This is the old Ice Age grasslands. Now it's primarily cattle ranches. They're going to hit farm ground. They don't recognize property ownerships, right? They need large landscapes to be able to meet their seasonal needs. So here's the farm ground. See the hay? This is out in central Montana. And you're going to see it. And notice the dust that they kick up when they got it in, in fast gear here. And you're going to see that. Now see how the rumps are up? You can see the white. Hair's erect. They know something's up. The plane's harassing them temporarily. This is a fixed wing, but now look at the dust there. Those things are moving. Isn't that neat? Just a neat thing. Well, I show you that because to maintain those type of connections takes some of the work we're going to talk about here. So the times they are a-changin'. I found that. This is cheesy. It's a Bob Dylan lyric. But my wife, Melora, on the right is sitting on a rock from this summer. That's the Grinnell Glacier. That's here a few months ago. And it's a living glacier. You can hear it crack. It's up high. It's about a 6-mile climb straight up, but it's really neat. Well, that was 14 years ago, the same rock. Mel and I were up there. And see, it's on the ice field. And that when you see big rocks like this on the right, and it's deposited kind of funny, it's like, how did that thing get there? And you think maybe it fell off the mountain. That's Mount Gould. And it probably did. But it was transported by ice out to where it was deposited when the ice pulled back. So as you kind of got to let your mind wander when you're up in these environments where ice is involved. But my point here is things are changing, and that's important for species. And this is a quote I use all the time. I circled the little bear cub's feet just because I think it's cute. I love that's from a helicopter. This is a family of 4 grizzly bears in the Cabinet Mountains where they're still endangered. But as our climate changes, and I'm not going to read slides tonight except for this one, annual precipitation patterns or temperatures, doesn't matter regardless of cause. You don't have to get political or whatever the issue is on climate, right? As precipitation and temps change, all species need to adapt to these changes. And to adapt, many have to find new food and shelter. In order to do that, they need to move. In order to move, they need the connectivity. That's why the spaces in between the public lands are critical. As our world changes, these species, if we want to keep them around, have to find their grocery store, and they need that open space. And so, again, we're going to work into the land trust with an expedition and start talking about connectivity now. And connectivity, I'm referring to connected habitat between blocks of protected land or public land or tribal protected lands, right? This is Mount Cleveland. It's the highest peak in Glacier National Park. And Melora and I are climbers, our kids, and we grew up climbing in the park. And Glacier is interesting. It's not like Colorado where you can park at 10,000 feet and hike to 14. we have 6,000 feet of vertical relief one way, and so it's just killer. But it's just breathtakingly beautiful. I love all these taxis that honk here. It's still killing me. We've been Ubering around, and it's just hysterical, but distracted. So that's Mount Cleveland, and this is Jerry Brown. He was a biologist in Libya, and he was an older guy. But he was like Jack LaLanne. He's just super fit, and he wanted to climb, and I just wanted to keep up because I'm kind of short-legged and built like a hobbit. And this is how you have to get to Mount Cleveland is on a boat in Canada. We're in Alberta in what's called Waterton Park. And so we start this big climb, and it's a huge mountain. And the north face on the left. So El Capitan, you saw Solo by Alex Honnold. That's 2,900 feet. Mount Cleveland, that face you can see, it's 4,000 feet straight up. And they have a picture of the old Twin Towers, is still on a sign there here in New York when you at Goat Hunt at the base camp. But it's a big mountain, and you can see these are pictures on the right as we're working our way up, and everything's going great. We had to do a change of clothes, and we're going to get to the summit, and then all of a sudden we started hearing rocks, and they're bang, crash, just big rocks rolling down. And we're like, what in the world? And here comes 2 grizzly bears. The 2 on the left, those 2 bears there, those are kind of subadults there. But they came running by, and we had to climb up this little cliff and let them run below us. And we went, huh. And then we look over, and you can see one on the snowfield. We had like 16 grizzly bears around us. And we're like, oh, no, we're on a mothing mountain. I'm going to talk about that because this is a form of connectivity, and this is what those bears are doing. They're up there eating army cutworm moths that are from the prairie. And so who would think that what happens in the prairie, perhaps in the Dakotas or eastern Montana or Wyoming, is going to affect a grizzly bear up at 10,000 feet? And here's a little short map, and there's a lot of papers you can do a deep dive. But this just shows how connectivity at a real extreme level from insect to mammal. And this happens throughout the grizzly bear's range. And the reason this is kind of cool is this is our kids. That's Melora. This guy, Eric Peterson here, he was kind of our climbing guide. He was a young guy. He'd wait on me. He was patient. He was one of our grizzly bear trappers when I was at FWP working for the Wildlife Agency. And so we became close friends, and he wanted to go to grad school. So he's just this climbing beast, and he's fearless. And he decided he wanted to look at moths and grizzly bears. He was the perfect person to do. And so those moths, and this is Eric and Mel going up on Bear Hat Peak and Glacier. I wanted to show you, a couple of you talked about Glacier Park. It's an incredible landscape. We're going up, but you can see in the alpine, there are lots of wildflowers that are full of nectar. That's why those moths are there in a dry time during the summer down low, right? They're up in the alpine. This goat here, so a lot of these peaks in Glacier have, all over the West, all over the world, have climbing registers, and I get obsessed. I want to sign the register, and Melora's going, Jim, don't bug the goat. It was killing me. And so the goat finally moved over there, and I could race over and sign the register. But that's in the Continental Divide and Glacier. So Eric got the project funded, and this is the kind of landscape he's working in. This is Kintla Peak in Glacier, which is one of the big ones, and it's really remote. This is a 3-day minimum expedition for most people that aren't ultra runners now. That's a whole new crowd. There's some incredible ultra runners that can combine it with climbing. This is not me, but it's just a great landscape to work in. And this is your operating environment when you're working on grizzly bears and moths. That's Hugh Key in front. He's an athlete, and he came from St. Louis on an exchange and he's a teacher now in Kansas City. But Hugh was kind of teasing Eric, I'm good, I got this. Well, then the first day was 6,000 feet straight up, and he's an incredible athlete, and he was humbled by the end of it. No one could keep up with Hugh, but this is his day one. He had to get it used to, the whole team had to get used to this kind of exposure. And look on the left, the lower left, one slip there, you're dead. So that's called class 4 exposure, and leaning steeper is class 5, and so that's what it takes to study this kind of thing. And I'm going to show you some videos because most people, Eric shared these and was excited to share them with all of you. This is a grizzly bear that's going to turn over a rock that's probably 200 pounds with one paw. And what she's doing, this is a female. Can you see the moths flying up? She's there. They like those moist, wet sites. There you go. No one in this room could. Maybe Justin could do that, but. And I'm going to talk about a little bit, too, here about technology. This is really neat. This is a clip from an incredible helicopter from Two Bear Air, and it's got an incredible thermal imaging camera. This is what Eric needed. Those thermal images are all grizzly bears in the alpine. And so they're connected to those moths that are born on the prairie, that come from the prairie, and they go up, and they're now, during the day, they're in this wet talus slope that Eric is studying. And this was Eric's graduate project. He graduated from grad school at a Washington State University, and what he determined, and you can see that's Mount Cleveland again, was that where the north faces, where the wet, cool faces of these high peaks, and there are many of these mothing peaks, that's a big bear, by the way, right there. You're going to see a couple males on here that are really big, in some really steep country. But where it's wet and cool, under the rock, the underground rivulets of water, that's where those moths are, right? Until they come out at night to look for the flowers, to the nectar. That's a big bear. Look at the muscles there. Yeah, so Eric's in a chopper, and he's not there. This is an incredible camera because he's a long ways away looking at these bears. There's just a couple more, but this is footage most people never get to see. And Eric was excited for me to share this with you all. He did some incredible, and it's also steep, so you don't want a misstep. But you know what these bears have? All-wheel drive. They're like a Subaru, or the original all-wheel drive. But you can see the country. This is again up on Mount Cleveland where Jerry and I got turned around. And now it's like, why did we even try that? And what killed me is it was all day. We could see the summit cairn and had to turn around, and that was hard. But it ended up in the end made for a better story. You're going to see him in a second, and I'll move on because this is all lead up to what we're doing. But connectivity comes in many forms. There you go. And there's some little cubs, too, that are kind of cute. The females will bring their cubs up to these sites. There's males. And have you noticed with the footage in Alaska when you have bears on a salmon stream, when there's lots of food, the bears tend to tolerate each other, not 100%, but more than they would at another time of year. You have lots of food. Eric and others think that is maybe perhaps going on here too, because this is a lot of large grizzly bears with females with cubs and big males, which normally they're not going to mix up, but they're on this incredible food source in August. And that just happens to be the climbing period, right? When it's snow-free. Okay. So he did his graduate work, and if you want to learn any more about that, but I wanted to talk about that because of this. Where Eric was working is way up on those public lands. That's Glacier Park. That's up the North Fork of the Flathead. The bottom is privately owned, privately held lands. Those animals there, in fact, this family of bears we had to put down because they were a family that lived up high, but they got into trouble down low with human garbage, human attractants, garbage, dump sites, whatnot. They become habituated. Then they actually can be dangerous. So they were removed. So why? Because the private lands are important. And that's what we're doing right now. This guy on the horse on his ranch, and he's out looking at his cattle. He's got to worry about bears, wolves, coyotes, got to worry about weather. He's got to worry about everything, market prices. We want to keep this operation going because this is open for dispersal for those grizzly bears to move from blocks of public land to public land. It's open for an elk migration. And so who can do that? Who can protect them? And these, and Mark, you've heard me say this, these are the unsung heroes in conservation. They're the land trusts. And you have them here. I know, Mark, you guys worked with one. They're all over the country. And we have 30 members in the Transboundary Rockies that are Heart of the Rockies Initiative. And the program we have is called Keep It Connected. And I like the name. It's just a catchy name. But this is where each one of these land trusts, if they have an easement with a property owner that represents wildlife connectivity, like an elk migration or antelope or grizzly bear carnivore connectivity, if it falls in an important area, we help close the gap. They use a tool called a conservation easement, and that's a property right that you have as a property owner in this country. You can sell one of your property rights, the right to subdivide, or you can donate it as part of your estate planning. If you don't want to grow homes on your land, which is happening more and more and more as the whole world wants to remote work and live in a postcard. I don't blame them. I mean, I came to Montana and or Wyoming or wherever it's pretty, and build your neighborhood there. That's going to fragment the habitat. Well, if you don't want that, you can do what's called a conservation easement with your local land trust. And these are the executive directors. And what that does, when you sell that ranch or if you pass away, that conservation easement stays on your title, so it's in perpetuity, and there's tax benefits tied to the IRS. Most of them that are funded and not donated come out of the Farm Bill that Congress approves. There's a program called ALE and ASEP at NRCS, incredible. And what it does, it protects food production. We need food in this country. We need agriculture on the land. I hear a lot of people badmouth ranchers or badmouth farmers. No, they're not the enemy. They never were. They never are. Sure, there are issues on different properties, right? Grazing, too much, maybe not, depends on your opinion, but we want them there for food production. We want them there for wildlife, and these are the groups that are doing it. And these are just a bunch of logos. But this is the area we're working in. And I'm going to try to use this pointer, and I think it was the green one. Yeah. So this is British Columbia up here. This is Alberta here. We're all the way down into eastern Washington, Idaho, Sun Valley, northern Utah, up to Jackson Hole. This is Yellowstone, the Wind River Reservation. That's the Shoshone-Bannock. This is Blackfeet, CSKT. This is the Transboundary Rockies. And folks, if you care about large mammals as a biologist, and this is what I do, this is the last best place. This is the hot spot for large mammal biodiversity in North America, and frankly, it rivals some of the African landscapes that some of you folks visit and work in too. It's the last best place. It's also the most desirable place to move to right now, post-COVID. So therein lies the problem. And it's no one's to blame. It's just we're mobile. We're mobile as people. We're mobile. We can Zoom in Teams changed the world, right? It really did. So here's how the program works. I'm going to show some examples. It's pretty cool. Each land trust can put up one project in a private portfolio, and it's pretty cool. And by the way, New York City, how many are from New York City here? So that's cool, because you can be proud. Liz Claiborne Art Ortenberg Foundation, Kent Womack, and Lillian and Aria, they seeded this program and started it, and to the tune of $1 million a year. And land transactions are expensive. But LCOF, the Liz Claiborne Art Ortenberg Foundation, is responsible for the permanent protection of countless ungulate migrations already and bear carnivore connectivity. So that's a New York City outfit. They're here, and yet they're working out there. So I just want to give them a shout out. But so a donor like that foundation gets to look on a private website, and each land trust puts up a property, and I'll show you what they look like. And they get to see this, and those blue lines Land trust data is very private, right? It's about your land, whether it's value, acres, whatever. But this is just a safe example to show you what a donor gets to see. So these are different land trusts, and if they want grizzly bear connectivity, they can surf through. If they want elk connectivity, it's a real unique program. If they want to protect antelope, they can go right to it. And they look at the gap that the Farm Bill doesn't fund or the rancher didn't need, or donated half, and they can close the gap. And it's kind of neat. It's almost like a dopamine rush to close these projects because they're forever. It's not temporary conservation. It's permanent. Not easy to do. And this is why everyone's so fired up now. On the left, all that spaghetti colors. This is Arthur Middleton and the Wyoming Migration Initiative team and universities out of Wyoming. They are mapping elk migrations. That's Yellowstone Park in the middle. And so I'm going to use the pointer, and you folks online that are watching tonight, I'm pointing at the middle of Yellowstone Park. That's summer range. That's where these elk all summer in the real green, nitrogen-rich, life is good, the salad days of summer. Well, these are all radio collar data. When the snows hit, see this guy licking the snowflakes? That looks like fun, right? On the right? A friend of mine took that. That's just a great photo. It just kills me. But eventually, the snow gets deep and you can't eat. You got to move. And these lines are radio collar data going into Montana, out on the prairie in Wyoming, out on the prairie into Idaho, down in southern Wyoming. They all migrate out of the park to winter. And so those migrations, like the one we talked about earlier, they've probably been occurring for millennia, right? They're probably Pleistocene type migrations. So there's some real good science now. And here's an example. And this is Yellowstone Park down here on the bottom of this map on the left, and with all the colors. All the purple dots and kind of purple swaths, that's telemetry data from the famous northern Yellowstone Park elk migration. Well, the Gallatin Valley Land Trust had a ranch in red, that red circle right there. They didn't want to grow homes. Everyone wants to develop that area because it's near Chico Hot Springs and Yellowstone, but they wanted to grow food still and cattle, and they valued the wildlife. They approached the land trust, and sure enough, this is what it looks like right here on the right, that foothills. So a lot of the foothill landscapes, it's not the high rocky icy stuff you see in postcards like the glacier we showed. It's not the river bottom. It's the side hills. Those are the view lots, and that's why they're threatened. They're also the migration habitat. All of these animals tend to migrate on the side hills, and they're critical. But so what happens is we have a conservation manager, Amy Katz. She's really good. She'll lay down all the data with the land trust, and they'll go through their Keep It Connected project and see how it matches. And if it is, then we can find a donor to close the project, and that's what we did with this one. And here's an example. I had a Chilean biologist, two of them with me in the truck. We caught that migration. This is driving down to Yellowstone. There are thousands of elk. And this isn't green up in spring, so it's just greening up. It looks a little rough. But this is the famous northern Yellowstone elk migration. There's just thousands of elk. It's incredible that we still have that in North America. And the Gallatin Valley Land Trust has just protected 4 or 5 of these projects, and the Arthur Blank Family Foundation has as well down there. He owns Home Depots. Thousands of elk. And for those of you that like to watch wolves, we have a wolf watcher here. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Yes. This is the reason there are wolves in Yellowstone. This is their grocery store. They're very important. People don't make that tie all the time. Antelope. And well, I'm going to talk about mule deer first. On the right, there's this long, long orange line. The Wyoming Game and Fish marked a mule deer doe. And they marked it way up here in Idaho. This is west of Yellowstone Park in a little corner of Idaho, Island Park. It's a real pretty area. And they had no idea. But this doe, when they marked it, when it came time to leave the summer range and go find a place to winter, it cut through Yellowstone Park, up in the high country, cut through Grand Teton National Park, went south right by Jackson Hole, through the mountains north of Pinedale, followed the Wind River Range way down into the Red Desert, way down into southern Wyoming, almost to the Utah or Colorado border. That's a migration, folks. And that path goes through some of the most developed oil and gas country, and so they've been working really closely with the oil and gas industry and Wyoming Game and Fish and the agencies and tribes to protect what's left of this. They call it the path of the pronghorn. This is mule deer. And on the left, the big yellow lines for you folks online, all the yellow, those are the modeled, based on telemetry, mule deer and elk paths coming out, and you can see the blue shading behind the yellow. Those are all permanent conservation easements that have been completed by the Jackson Hole Land Trust, the Wyoming Stock Growers, and the Nature Conservancy. So it's a good news story. So we're moving in the right direction, because this is what we need to do if we want to keep these. If you want to see these animals in Yellowstone, you got to protect where they winter, or you're not going to see them there. It's as simple as that. We're going to go big now for a little bit, and we're going to go to things with tooth and claw. So this is a grizzly bear, not a black bear, on the lower right. This is Mike Medell. He's one of my former colleagues. He's a bear biologist. That is one of the biggest bears he ever captured. It's over 1,000 pounds. That's like an Alaska salmon bear. It's not normal for a bear down here. Just south of, and he got this bear just south on the Rocky Mountain front, just above his head. That's the central front. Those pepper dots are all elk wintering, by the way. It's like, it's kind of Montana's Serengeti. But these bears get meat as well as vegetation here, and that's what Mike and other biologists think one of the reasons they get so big. It's just super productive environment. But these bears are out, they den historically up in the mountains on the left. You see Glacier Park, everything in yellow is the Blackfeet Reservation, and everything in blue are projects out on the prairie that the bears live and use in summer a lot. They're den up high, but they come down low in that transitional habitat that the Conservation Fund has been quietly working with willing ranchers, willing landowners to protect their lands. And as you can see, south of the reservation, I'll talk about the reservation in a second, south of the reservation, that landscape's getting protected. If you go to Canada, you go to Colorado, it's kind of gone. You know, Boulder, Fort Collins, it's still beautiful down there, but it's not wild like it is here. And so that's a big deal. Now, focus on that red star on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. One of the other projects we have that's a good news story, the Blackfeet tribe, Dylan DeRozier, a tribal member, works for the Nature Conservancy, approached us, and the landowner too, non-tribal white landowner, had all the land you can see in this photo. That's Glacier National Park, and that's a sacred peak for the Blackfeet people. Here in Canada, there are multiple bands in the Blackfeet Confederacy. That's Chief Mountain. This land, everything you can see in the foreground, this gorgeous wildflowers and aspen parklands, is full of grizzly bears. It's got bison that the Blackfeet tribe, that they're doing an incredible innovative program to reintroduce wild bison right now. But it's also got a really rare animal called a Canada lynx. And you actually have some up north into Canada here. But in addition to bobcats, we have lynx and mountain lions in Montana. But I'm going to talk about lynx. They're really the ghosts of the snowy deep forest. I usually see pictures in summer where it's real pretty. When you work on wildlife, this is where you got it. This is what you're out in snow that's, you know, waist deep or deeper, trying to find these things and capture them and study them. But I'm going to show you some footage that's kind of fun. I'm holding this cat I'm holding here weighs about the same as your house cat. They're very featherweight, and they have these large feet. They're like snowshoes, and they, if you think about it, they got to run across this deep, fluffy powder snow to chase snowshoe hares and grouse and what they eat in winter. And so this is a male and a female in spring breeding season that were live captured. The blood is from the deer leg bait, but just happened to get two, and they're just gorgeous animals, and most people never get to see them alive because they're ghosts. They literally are. And they're larger, longer legs than a bobcat. They're just incredible animals. Now, they're not happy here because they're in a trap. All right. But that's kind of neat. And so so working with the Blackfeet on that project, that's what we call a land back, right? So if you think about tribes and lands that were stolen from them, not when any of us were here, but lands were stolen from them 100 years ago to 200 years ago, depending upon the tribe. Land trusts represent an opportunity for tribes in one form or another to get back on lands that their ancestors are buried on, lands that had foods for them, like camas or huckleberries, lands that they hunted on, lands that they love. And so we do two types of projects. A land back is when the tribes get it in fee title, like the lynx habitat there. But we also are working on a toolkit we have a graduate student that we have landowners approaching land trusts now saying, I want to let my local tribe back on the land. I know there are people here that are buried on my ranch. I know there are important cultural sites. How do I do that? So it's a very sensitive thing for tribes, and it's and the land trust, it's very sensitive there too. But we're real excited. That's the future. Is not only wildlife conservation, but get some of these indigenous peoples that back on their lands when you have willing landowners, and more willing landowners are approaching these land trusts. Okay, let's go up north. This is a real neat area, and this is still in Blackfeet country in Alberta. And this is Waterton National Park here, and Nature Conservancy Canada. They're different than our Nature Conservancy. They worked and just finished, and we closed this easement. This is over 50,000 acres on the top right of native prairie grassland. And you can see all the farm ground around it. Native prairie is probably one of the most threatened ecosystems on the planet. And shortgrass, this is shortgrass prairie here. And below, when we were on this with the rancher, that's a herd of elk that just came rolling over the hill. It was really cool. It just felt like going back in time. But on the left, that is some of the most healthy native bunchgrass, rough fescue bunchgrass lands. And way in the middle of that picture on the left, that's Chief Mountain looking from the north, from Canada looking south. And so the landowner, he's interested in keeping this grassland intact because of the carbon storage with the root systems. These grasslands store an incredible amount of carbon. And he's interested in the wildlife. He has a unique breed of livestock he's very proud of. But this is another example of one of our projects. And 2 weeks later, I asked the rancher, "Do you ever get grizzlies way out here?" And the rancher's son sent me this. You're going to hear him say something here a little bit. But that's a young grizzly on the ranch.
Young one.
You'll hear him here.
Holy shit.
Yeah. That's a common refrain from a rancher. But that's pretty cool that nature is a nomad. Nature's starting to reclaim, if we as humans allow it, they're starting to reclaim places that they once occupied. So it's a good news story. So I spent a lot of my career handling things, managing problem wildlife, and that's problem with people. It's usually problem people. And artificially moving bears. In this case, this is a big male that got in trouble. They get several strikes. And this is Tim Manley, the bear biologist behind me. I'm just posing with the bear. I was the wildlife program manager for the state at the time. But that's a huge male grizzly bear. Look at the head. And but I spent a lot of time, helping, and my crews did augmenting populations, which is good, moving conflict bears up high so it buys time to clean up the attractant down low. We live with grizzly bears in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho. I mean, they literally are in your backyard if you're in certain neighborhoods. But really, where we need to spend our time is the natural connectivity. And there's two maps here, and this is some exciting new science, kind of like the elk migration. The right is males. Look at blue, just the blue color. And Yellowstone Park, let's start with the map on the right-hand side. Yellowstone Park's at the bottom. Glacier Park, where Melora and I live, is way up at the top. And this is new data from satellite radios, GPS, where you have thousands of locations. And we separated, the team did, it was Sarah Sells and her team, females and males from this data, steps that they chose where to put their feet on what habitats to model the most likely connectivity, and came up with this cutting edge paper. And so now we have these mapped areas that if we have a willing landowner coming to a land trust saying, I don't want to grow homes, I want to stay in agriculture, and I want that to be in perpetuity, and if it lands in one of these, and I got a donor, you can permanently protect grizzly bear connectivity. And that's just what happened here. Gallup Valley Land Trust again. I'm going to use them in a couple examples today. On the left, you can see this area between 2 blocks of public land and this property that the ranching family approached the land trust about, landed right smack dab in the middle of the best science on the planet, model connectivity habitat. And you can kind of see it over here on the right. The green is Forest Service, the yellow is BLM, but look at all the private. The private land's the key to the future. So the land trust was able to close through our Keep It Connected program. We found a donor, closed the project, and now it's protected permanently in perpetuity. So bears can connect between mountain ranges. That's a big deal. Here's what it looks like. So the bears can roll off the mountain, and then you got this open space. And plus, it's visually pleasing as well, but it's also a working agricultural family that's producing food. And I think they even do unique bees here and honey. Okay, something I'm near and dear to and familiar with. Take a look at the neck. See that little box on that radio collar? This is a landowner west of, and see that? I want you to take a look at that little CD in the middle flashing. He knew what he was doing. This landowner set up, cats like sparklies. They're very visual. Cats' eyes are on the front of their head. They're not on the side. They can reflect light, see at night. Well, I got this call. Does anyone know who radioed this cat? And I was like, yeah, well, I can find out. So I started calling everyone. Who's marked a cat? Nobody. And I'm calling Wyoming, Idaho, the tribes. And I'm like, my gosh, who's marked that cat? That's a new, well, then I thought, Canada. And sure enough, this cat was marked by a friend of mine. This is the cat on the lower right when she was a kitten. It was a female. Here's a screenshot from the video. They marked her north of Jasper National Park near Edmonton. Females typically don't disperse this far, at least that's the assumption based on the research to date. This female went through primarily private land. You can see the importance of open landscapes. Almost 400 miles to Montana near Glacier Park. And you can see when she was marked as a kitten versus the adult. But this just underscores carnivores sometimes, especially when it comes to dispersal. That's a strategy to move their DNA, their genetic material around the landscape, right? It's incredible. And that's the value. And wolves are no different. This is Wendy Cole in the lower left. She works for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. She shared a video I'm going to share with you too. But take a look. She got a call to retrieve this collar in the Yak Valley, right where Idaho, Montana, and British Columbia meet. That's a real remote area called the Yak Valley, Y-A-A-K. Super remote. Well, she's up there, and then once she gets it, she realizes it was a store-on-board collar, and once that data was downloaded, that wolf came from the pack in Banff Park on the right, and just show. And this wolves go even further than this. Some of you are wolf experts in the audience, but Wendy wanted to share some video too. A lot of people don't get to see them. They come in two primary color variants, at least in the West. This is the dark form. They get from dark gray to black, and they're also a light form. This is a younger one. You know, Wendy's got lure on the road. She's trying to catch him to put. Look at this guy. I like this. Well, he's going to pee. And he's got something in his mouth. Typical guy. That's a male wolf, right? It just, yeah. And here's a young pup. I had to put some cuteness in here. Now, she's got lure on sticks. So she's got cameras up, and they're not too different than domestic dogs, right? Now, here's the puppy cuteness here. This is clearly near a den. Wendy does den work to see pups that are born each year versus, the pack size in the fall. And then this is kind of funny. This is a classic 50-50 ratio of black to whites. And Diane Boyd, another wolf biologist, is doing some research and going to write a book on the genetic. She just wrote one called A Woman Among Wolves, by the way. It's good. Look at this guy on the right. They play like your dogs. But the black ones perhaps have better evolutionary fitness than the gray ones, and that research is still being borne out. Okay, we're going to go from dogs and lions to another really cool species that you probably don't get to see here too much. I've seen footage of them in Michigan on the Great Lakes when they were frozen one year. These are wolverines. These are the largest members of the weasel family. And I'm holding it's not dead. That's a tranquilized wolverine. And that's a young, on the left in the cottonwood tree, that's a young wolverine. Chris Hammond was one of our biologists, got a call from a camper in the North Fork saying, I got a wolverine in a cottonwood tree. And we're like, yeah, right. You get a lot of people. It's hilarious. People call golden retrievers lions. And so you get kind of jaded when you work, and you get all these calls. Well, by golly, this guy was right. He got there, and Chris got back. He goes, Jim, you're not going to believe this. It was a wolverine. And it was down low. Well, it's in the connectivity habitat. It was young, trying to strike out and find a home of its own in a mountain range. They exist at very low densities. And the one on the right I'm holding is from a project in Glacier Park. Probably one of the coolest ones. It's another good book called The Wolverine Way that Patagonia published, who published my book, if you're interested in wolverines. But I'm going to show you, Melora and I were on that glacier that I showed you earlier, and I was just like, Melora, we need to go in a crevasse. I want to get a picture of Mel with blue ice on either side before it's gone. I want to, the whole thing like we're in the Alps, whatever. And we go in this glacier, and you can see the crevasses, but you can walk in the side. And we heard a noise, and I think we'd already taken the pictures, and we heard a noise eventually, and I was like, uh-oh, bear cubs, because all of a sudden we heard movement. We got out into movement, and then I look, and they were loping like this, and this is one of them right here. And what I want you to notice on the screen, the far left to the top on that Rocky Mountain is a mountain goat. Watch it. There were several mountain goats watching this wolverine. There was two of them. But this is the Explorers Club. Some of you all are climbers. There's some famous firsts here. I guarantee you no one had crampons like this guy because he's going to walk right up on the sheet ice. Watch this. These are natural crampons. I think it's funny that goat's there, though, watching it too. But to me, this is an Ice Age looking scene, right? That's the Pleistocene right there. And it's still here. And that warms my heart. Okay, watch this. That's sheet ice. He doesn't even slip. That goat's still watching him. There's a couple more goats back there. There was 2 wolverines. The other one circled around Eric behind us and Mel. Isn't that neat? They are the climbers, and they'll climb, a 6,000-foot face in winter just because it's there. What straight up? Isn't that neat? Look at them lope there. They kind of have a lope. So to learn about wolverines and protect their habitat and the connectivity between their habitat, they were just listed, by the way, this year. And they were listed because of climate change concerns, concern about snowpack and temperature. They're a creature of the Ice Age. So this is Dr. Bob Inman. He's holding a wolverine. It's drugged. Bob did some long-term research in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho, right in that Yellowstone corner. And in order to catch them, use this big log trap. You got to catch them alive. They're very difficult, and it's got a lid that falls down with bait. And you can see there's a capture one. Look at the roof. These things have little grizzly bear jaws and skulls. And, I mean, almost more by size and structure, it's almost more dense than a bear skull. And the reason is, if you think about it, they scavenge. They eat bones from ungulates killed in avalanches. They'll dig 20 feet through the snow and eat and get marrow crunching through a bone. They're crunching machines. Well, you don't have a lot of time to get them out of these traps, so they'll chew their way out. And so right here, and Alex, the wolverine in back, I showed him this earlier. That was pretty cool. I'm going to click this. This is what happens. In order to drug them, you have a jab stick. And you got to be careful. It's got a syringe and Hollis, you probably use jab sticks on panthers. You got to open and you poke that thing real quick in the flank and get out before you get bit or it gets out. Same thing with the bear and the snare, and that's what's Bob shared this. This is kind of cool. Alex was my sound effect guy. We couldn't get the sound to work. That was Alex. Everyone give Alex a hand back there. That was, yeah. Alex makes a great Wolverine. All right, we'll get serious now again, but that was kind of fun. I wanted to show you animal footage. So when the service and the researchers modeled wolverine habitat, here's on the left, in that green circle, that's where they're at right now, the Cascades, the Northern Rockies. The actual climate refuge, the most snow and the cool, is sitting down here in Colorado and the Uintas in Utah, and of course the Sierras. Well, there's a couple areas that represent habitat in between that, again, the theme is connections, wildlife connections. This is the connectivity habitat. Flip to the right, the Bear River Land Conservancy, it's a land trust in Logan, had a property owner, this ranch, want to protect it, and it's right smack in the middle of this range to have open space for mule deer migrations, elk migrations, bears. But now, thinking about wolverines on their own getting to Colorado or Utah someday, luckily this landowner wanted to grow food and not homes. And so the Bear River Land Conservancy, this is the landowner here on the left, and this is the land. He has everything you can see in here. Is protected now in a permanent conservation easement. And sure enough, just north, Utah Fish and Game captured a wolverine dispersing south and right along this crest, not on the property, and they radioed it and ended up in the Uintas. And I think they're very hard. They shed their radios. They have a fusiform shape and they can pop them off. But the other thing that's neat about this one is, I have a lot of dear friends and colleagues in the tribes in my area. This is the Shoshone-Bannock tribe, but he told the Bear River Land Trust and Heart of the Rockies, myself, I was there in the kitchen, he said, we protected a site that the Shoshone-Bannock tribe used after the Bear River Massacre on the river right on the Idaho-Utah border here. And the surviving tribal members went to his ranch, and since they've had it, they've protected this hidden basin where the tribe survived, and there was a spring, and it's a real important cultural site for their entire duration since they've owned the ranch. And so he said he's interested in working with the tribe to end the land trust to make sure the tribes always have access to that place instead of subdivisions or a ski resort here. It's Utah, right? People put a ski hill there. But so we do have some really cool, caring landowners that want to stay in food production, care about the indigenous people. So I'm going to show good news. So then we get to do some really big projects sometimes. And this is, I was totally fanboying here. This is Secretary Deb Haaland, Secretary of the Interior. Melora and I got to meet her summer before last because one of our other partners, the Trust for Public Land, someone mentioned Trust for Public Land, yeah, and Dick Dolan, who was my contact at the time, out of Bozeman. But everything that's purple and gray on this map, this is Idaho to the left, Montana to the right, and it goes all the way down to the Bitterroot. Everything that is gray and purple was owned by corporate timberlands like Weyerhaeuser, Plum Creek. Those were given or purchased back when railroads were created, way back when states were created, and they are all vulnerable to subdivision. Well, Trust for Public Land is another incredible land trust, worked very carefully with the states and with the Forest Legacy Program that came out of Vermont. Anyone from Vermont here? Senator Leahy from Vermont. That funding is still being used right now. We're working in here. But all of this is under conservation easement that you can see in color and protected forever, connecting public lands. So Secretary Haaland came out. We had the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribal leadership up, and it was just a wonderful day, but I had to show that because I got a picture with Deb Haaland. So I'm going to wrap it up tonight a little bit, and we're going to switch to lions and have to answer some questions. But these things are permanent, folks. I'm kind of selfish with my time because I'm not young anymore. But the time that I have left that I want to spend working and not having a margarita in San Diego someday and longboarding and snorkeling. Keep threatening to do that, but I like the work too much, and Melora and I love to ski. These things are permanent. When I'm dead and gone and leave this beautiful planet, all these land trusts, all of their projects are still here. And they're starting, like I say, they're partnering with tribes, they're protecting wildlife, and they're keeping food around. They're not cheap. And I'm going to brag a little bit on the Heart of the Rockies initiative. This Keep It Connected program I'm talking about, we've done 74. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 250,000 acres permanently protected. And donors, the donors we have with the program right now have given over $14.5 million to the land trust. We're kind of passed through to make sure and kind of the honest broker of connectivity to the donors. And they have that private website, which they love. It's like shopping, which is kind of fun. But they're permanent, and that's what I want to emphasize. We're all gone. These things still remain. So these land trusts are unsung heroes. Okay, I wrote a book, and some of you in here wanted me to talk about the book, and I had to throw this up. If you want to learn more about the book, Buddy Mark here did an interview for the Explorers Club. It was 3-4 years ago, and it's really good. It's online, and you can do a deep dive. But I do want to. It's called Path of the Puma. Patagonia published it, and connectivity is the theme, and tolerance. There's two parts of connectivity. One is the land, and the other is the human brain, because you can protect a ranch. But if the landowner wants to kill every bear, wolf, or lion on it, it's really not permeable, right? So you kind of work with the human, and those are the tools like non-lethal, like range riders, electric fencing, bear-proof sanitation. You got to work with the people, too. So the theme of my book, and it takes place in Argentina and Chile and up in the Transboundary Rockies, is connectivity and tolerance, and a lot of cool lion stories, but that's my shameless plug. But I'm going to show you some footage on cats just because they're really darn cool. And so this is in our valley. Now watch her. This is a female. You can't even see her move. You can't even see her breathe unless you're looking really close. This is why you never see them, but they see you. If you're in an area in the west that has deer, lions are probably watching you. You just do not know that they are. And this one's kind of up to no good. What's she doing in the backyard? Because here comes the full cubs. Now you can imagine with the advent of these security cameras, the calls you get when you have these kinds of lions in your backyard. People, they just move to the mountains from, let's say, Manhattan, and they go, "Holy crap, what do I do?" You know. And it's like, you're okay. The cats are going to move on, and 90% of the time they do. They're just down there working. They have large home ranges, but isn't that neat footage? And this one, Melora and I were in San Diego for another Explorers Club event and a couple months ago, and one of the landowners zipped me this. And what I like here is the security, and this one was an intentional camera trap. a guy named, oh no, I can't remember her name. But she's put it up, and the audio is really good. And if we can hear it, it sounds like a cat lapping milk out of a bowl. It's just kind of cool. Isn't that funny? I don't know why I think that's so funny, but I do. I like that. And then see that reflective light in the eyes? They have a little lens in the back that it reflects light twice. See that? That's so they can see at night. Right? They do most of their predation at night. Isn't that neat? So the next video sequence I'm going to share is a little startling for some people, but nature, and if you like large carnivores and predation, it's not always pretty from our human emotional brains, right? We're compassionate creatures. But this is how these carnivores make a living. So I have some very rare footage I'm going to show you now. This is a white-tailed deer being killed by a lion. Looks like a male in near Whitefish, where Melora and I live. The woman, you're going to hear her yell a little bit. But take a look at that lion. Whips its head up and looks at her. It's not happy. And it drags this deer away. It's in the process of dying. So lions, real quick, I'm going to get squirrel here. But mountain lions will typically wrap around an ungulate as they try and take it down and clamp down on the trachea of the windpipe until they stop kicking. Not always, but most of the time. They're going to go for the head. So if you're ever out there and you had an incident with a cat, and they're extremely, extremely rare, but if you did, make sure you protect your trachea and your head, and always fight back. Always fight back with a cat. So watch this, and I just think it's phenomenal footage. See how the feet are wrapped? Those are all claws on every foot, too. Big claws. Look. You're going to hear her in a minute.
Hey! Get to the side! Get to the side!
So look at the look of this cat now. He's not having it. Not going to let the deer go either. So this reminds me of a leopard in Africa, dragging an impala. You see it on nature. It just didn't take it up a tree, right? So predation's not pretty, but that's how it happens. And they're the most efficient killers in the Americas, as you're looking at it right there. They kill animals their size or larger. African lions, other than an elephant, typically don't. But these things are incredible. I'm going to end tonight's talk. We'll go to questions with a little bit on the book, and then I'll be happy to answer.
Most people don't realize that every time they're in the woods, there's a pretty good probability that a mountain lion could be watching you. We don't realize they're there, but they are. Pumas are one of the most adaptable large carnivores on the planet. They really do tolerate us if we tolerate them. Mountain lions have the greatest distributions of a large mammal on planet Earth, throughout Patagonia, all the way up to the Yukon. They really influence the ecosystem in many ways. I've been fortunate enough to spend a career working on mountain lions and getting to know them, the wild places they live, and the people who'll fight and step up to protect them. Working with wildlife is always unpredictable. Things can go wrong, things can go smoothly. You just never know until you're there.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot about people by working with mountain lions. Everything's connected, and that's what we've learned over the years. I continue to be inspired by both mountain lions and people. Following the path of the Puma has really been rewarding. I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay. So I'm going to close it with, for all my fellow Explorers Club members and fellows, if you know people that have the capacity to help in this kind of work, send them my way. You can find me through the Explorers Club or keepitconnected.org. I put the website up. Time is not on our side when it comes to the threat of subdivisions. So foundations or individuals, we'd love to have you partner with us. And it's permanent work, so it's a lot of fun. And with that, Mark and Felix, I want to thank Felix and Alex in the back for the Explorers Club for doing this. Thanks. Okay. Yeah.
Talk about so inspiring. Oh my gosh, man. You're doing incredible work. Jim Fowler would be very proud to have you here at the club tonight. I wanted to say I'm just so moved, and I want to support Land Trust because of this guy, and support the Heart of the Rockies Initiative, and also support your local land trust. I mean, it's unbelievable the work they do. You know, we develop around 6,000 acres a day in the United States. Land Trust save 5,000 acres a day. Nobody knows this. They do it quietly. They do it, you know, under the radar, and it's incredible work. So, but I want to hear more. You know, I know we all have questions, so let's hear some. Whoever has any questions, let's have Jim answer a few. So, go ahead, raise your hands.
Thank you very much, sir. So, if you were to do leopard conservation in South Africa, in the south, and you had all agricultural lands and people that, you know, kill every predator that comes around. You talked about having the land trust as the mechanism, right? Is it the land trust that comes first, or is it the education to the farmer? Like, I just kind of need to know that, because I'm actually working on a shepherding project in South Africa right now.
That's a very good, nuanced, and complicated question. My bias, my warped view of the world, it starts with the people in the local community. The land trust will do no good if you don't have willing people. And if food, water, and shelter are an issue, economics are an issue, disease, whatever is there, you know, it's hard to make people, local and rural communities, care about conservation when they can't find clean drinking water. So it depends on what your operating environment is, and that, I don't think anyone's really figured that out as a textbook, but I would start rural and local, and that's messy work. For us, from a European, an American, we consider that messy work, but that's the only way it's going to be durable. The other model is to have someone with very large capacity to just buy land and kick people out, and we learned long ago that didn't work, and we're trying to undo that model now. And so local and rural is the durable, and I think the right way to start, and will be the most effective. But oh man, it could be very tough, right? Depending on where you're at.
One back here.
That's a tough question.
I have another tough question, because nobody wants to talk money.
Yep.
If a landowner does not donate an easement, what is that average value? Can you throw some numbers out there of what the easement costs to acquire?
Well, I can give you the gap average. You know, it's highly variable, but in this country and in the West, so if you think about where property values have skyrocketed, real estate values, and property taxes along with that, post-pandemic primarily. You had the pandemic, and you had remote work kind of collide at the same time. So everyone wanted to leave places that looked like Manhattan, because no one knew, right, if they were going to die or not for a while. And then Teams and Zoom and other remote work thing, it just was a perfect recipe. People go, hey, I want to ride a mountain bike in Colorado. I don't want to live wherever. They want to change. And property values took off. And on top of that, then that show called Yellowstone came out. Oh my gosh. So I'm glad you asked this question, because Melora and I are walking down, we're tourists, we're walking down Times Square, and there's these great big 5-story Yellowstone ads. There's Rip and you know, and they got the Yellowstone. I'm like, oh my God, they're advertising this in New York. No wonder. And so, but that has created this land rush to buy property, and the supply and demand then kicks in, and the values, and these are amenity buyers with capacity that want to just have a ranch. Can't blame them, but what that does is the local neighbors who grow agriculture, they don't have that kind of capacity, so their taxes go up. I mean, it's a complicated economic issue, but most cases, in the area we work, the Farm Bill has a program that if NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Services, they deliver the Farm Bill in this country, right? They're the federal agency. They have a really neat program and really good staff. And if the soils match their program, they can actually get paid for an easement in this program through the Farm Bill. And depending upon the landowner's needs, the family's needs, is it an inheritance issue? Is it kids need to go to college? It depends on, some are donated, outright donated. They don't need money. But if they do, often the Farm Bill doesn't meet what the landowner wants, and there's what's called a gap, and that's where our Keep It Connected program in, because each one of these projects, the gaps are from 50,000 typically to 400,000. 100 to 300 is pretty common in that area, that I'll need to go connect a donor to a land trust if they want to save bears or an antelope migration in it, and it meets what the donor wants. That's typically the gap, but they can be small. You know, I've had $10,000 gaps. They're just there, and the landowner needs a little more. And find a donor, and they can be bigger, like those big ones with Secretary Deb Haaland when she was out in Trusted Public Land. Those are $20 to $30 to $40 million projects, and that's Forest Legacy program money back east, right? That's government money. But that's a good question too. But so the gap is typically 100 to 300,000, is I just off the top of my head. That's typically needed by a property owner. But lots of folks donate them. They care that much about their property. They're proud of their land. Yes.
Hi.
Wait for the microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name's Joe Butera, and I want to give a shout out to Mark. Hey, how you doing? I'm president and co-founder of the Northeast Ecological Recovery Society, which is dedicated to restoring native species to the Northeast, and I'm a proud member of the Explorers Club. I had a couple glasses of wine, so. But we're trying to prove that wolves are making their way down, and mountain lion. We're trying to restore native American chestnut trees. But my question to you is, A to A is similar to Y to Y, Adirondack to Algonquin Park. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to protect that land between these two areas so that connectivity can continue?
Y'all don't ask easy questions. I think the model, we have a really good model. I think the land trust model for permanent conservation depends on how you want to invest your conservation funds. I mean, they're precious, right? You want to do research, you do education in a community, or do you want to protect the land? It depends on your objective with your group and your board, but it's, so I'm going to kind of hedge my answers. I think, again, it's local and rural communities are key. And local and rural communities are often very conservative. And so you're going to have to find common ground and meet those communities where they're at, in my mind, in my experience, in order to make any progress at all that's durable, or it's going to, as soon as you're done, it's gone. And that's messy, long-term, challenging. It requires relationship building at a very trusted scale, and that takes a long time. So it's not something that's going to happen immediately. Why do I? Oh, there's so many groups that are doing good work. I just haven't seen a better model than a land trust, because the property owners themselves, the community. A lot of land trusts do community work and food production in urban areas and green space and water quality. You know, it just, you know, I'm spoiled. I live in an area where we got clean water. There are areas in this country with lead in pipes and they don't have clean water. And so it's all relative, right? And but I think local and rural is where you need to go, and start at the community level and not at an ivory tower level.
Where do our wild donkeys and wild horses fit into this picture?
Oh, these are just tough questions. You got. So this is just my personal opinion. Neither are native, and they're harmful to all native wildlife. They're extremely harmful. We as humans love horses. I love horses. Who doesn't? And the John Denver video with the wild horses and the song, I mean, I just love it. It's hard to, but it is extremely harmful to native habitats and native wildlife. So it's a human value. If you value horses and wild donkeys, you're going to love that. If you value native species, you might not, because it is very harmful. That's a human choice whether those non-native species are here or not. And that gets into emotional things and away from science. So that would be my qualified answer. That's another tough question.
We got one more.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. This has been such a cool talk. But I was wondering, is there any risk when you start opening up these corridors through ranch land, whether there's any risk of disease going from the wild animals to the domestic?
That's a good question, too. For some species, yes. And there's always, honestly, there's always risk for diseases, right? Zoonotics. I mean, you look at the whole issue with COVID and wild animals and people. But here, domestic sheep, for instance, and wild sheep, mixing is not a good thing. Connectivity between the two of those typically results in the wild sheep disappearing, right? They get the Imovi complex, like a Pastorella pneumonia complex that domestic sheep have. There's some incredible research going on right now on how to make them, those two, the wild and the domestics, compatible. But for most of the other species, brucellosis, elk can carry brucellosis, bison can carry brucellosis. Those are issues on the landscape. But those animals are moving around regardless of whether a family has a conservation easement on their ranch or not. Those wild animals are going where they want to go as long as they can move. But yeah, that disease is always an issue. It's already here.
Wow.
Probably always will be.
This guy is my hero. I'll tell you something. You know, the truth is we're here. First of all, we should support his project in the Rockies, number one, because that's incredible work. But one thing we forget is we have these animals here, right here in the Northeast. You know, we have bears, we have coyotes, which are 40% wolf. Okay, we have you know, a mountain lion was hit on the Merritt Parkway, right in Greenwich, Connecticut, not long ago, a few years back. So we have these animals here, and we have the same opportunities to preserve them and to preserve land and habitat. You know, the largest threat to all life on Earth is loss of habitat, including our own. You know, that's our biggest threat, I would argue. So I just want to say I'm just so grateful that we had Jim here tonight, and thank you for leading the cause out west and nationally with your messaging. You know, we're all part of the natural world. You know, cars are much more deadly than any native wildlife in the United States or planet-wide. And we don't shoot cars. So, you know, we should value our native wildlife, and we should celebrate that they're out here. They're very low risk when you look at actual risks in the modern world. So thank you, Jim, and get the book, Path of the Panther, and support the work. And thank you, and we're so glad you all came out tonight. Okay, good. Great. Your vet book.